At Home with Music. I'm Leon O'Gean. I'd like to talk to you about how to beat stage fright. So maybe you're teaching your children the basics of keyboard and they've gone on to take some piano lessons and now they've got to perform in a recital and they're nervous. Well, that's natural. Stage fright is very common. Your palms start sweating, your muscles tense up, your heart, it starts beating so loud that you think certainly the whole audience can hear the beating of my heart. And it's stage fright. That's also called performance anxiety. And it's a very common ailment that affects many musicians, even musicians who have been performing for years and years have been afflicted by stage fright. In fact, I've heard stories about the famous singer Barbra Streisand, who had to use a teleprompter when she was performing live because she was afraid she was going to forget the lyrics and she'd get really nervous. The singer Adele has talked about her stage fright. It's a well-known story among rock and roll musicians and actually among a lot of folks that know the history of the Beatles, that John Lennon suffered from stage fright. And he would often have to throw up before he went on stage. If your children, if your students suffer from stage fright, well, they need to know they're not alone and it's not their fault. Now, I've been a performer for over 50 years and I've learned how to deal with stage fright. And so, because I've been performing for so long and I'm used to being in front of people both as a public speaker and as a musician, I still get excited and a little bit nervous, but I don't get that total anxiety of total stage fright. First of all, why do you get stage fright? Why do some of your students get stage fright? Well, it's a natural reaction to your fight or flight response. It's a survival adaptation that kicks in whenever you feel threatened. So what's the threat that a performer feels that causes performance anxiety? Well, naturally, when you're getting in front of a group of people to do anything, whether it's speaking or playing music, well, you want their approval. And so when your student gets in front of an audience, they've got to play in a recital, they want people to like them. And so now they're front and center and they're under a spotlight and there's that threat of not getting that approval. I think you get up there and you start thinking, what if they don't like me? What if I make a mistake and they really hate that mistake and they end up not liking me? And even after performing countless times and getting nothing but praise, there are still performers who experience stage fright. So I'd like to share with you some ways to beat stage fright, because you can beat it. First of all, be well prepared. That's why you have to practice. That's why you have to make sure you can get through your pieces without making a mistake. And along those lines, number 2, don't attempt to perform a piece. This is what you can tell your students. Don't attempt to perform a piece when you still struggle with it in practice. In other words, play something that's just a little bit below your limits as a performer. In other words, play something that's a little bit easy for you to play, and you know you can get through it without any major stumbles. And remember, it's normal to feel nervous. Here's another way to beat stage fright. You can play as part of a group. Now, my wife is a very accomplished performer, and she started out leading singing in church, but she didn't get up there alone. She went up there and was standing with a more experienced song leader, and then she would play along. She didn't necessarily have to sing the lead, and that enabled her to get over the initial nervousness of being in front of people, and she became more and more confident as a performer, and then eventually she was able to perform alone. Another thing to remember is that audiences are very forgiving. They usually forget all your mistakes. I remember playing in a recital once, and I thought I played pretty well, and then I got up to walk off the stage and I tripped over the piano bench. Fortunately, there are probably very few people today who remember that incident, although I remember it quite vividly, unfortunately. But audiences are very forgiving, and really they're rooting for you. They want you to do well. And if you make a mistake, or if you have to stop and you start over again, they're going to forget all about that by the time you get to the end. They're not going to be upset about it. They're not going to get on your case about it. They're just going to say, oh, well, those things happen, and boy, I can understand how that could go, and well, that's just the way it goes. Audiences are very forgiving and also very forgetful. Another thing to remember that helps your students overcome stage fright is that it's an honor for them to get up in front of folks and bring a little joy and happiness into their life. And finally, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. I have the benefit of 50 years of experience as a performer. And so even if they have a rough time when they get out there and play in a recital, and it's a lot of nerves and everything, the more they do it, the easier it will get. So encourage your students. You can help them deal with their nerves, just not to get overly upset about it. It's normal. It happens to everybody. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And with perseverance, it can be overcome. That's my word of encouragement for you today. If you're teaching your children the basics of keyboard and they've gone on to take some piano lessons, they can do this. They can get over that stage fright. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Thanks again for watching, for listening, and please like this video. It helps the channel a lot. You can subscribe to the video, or subscribe to the channel rather, if you haven't already, and you can support my work on Patreon. I will leave the links below. Thanks again, and I will talk to you in the next one.